And welcome everybody to our 193rd Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series webinar. We got a perfectly timed winter storm. Can we call it a winter storm, Pete? I don't know. We got snow
I don't
coming
think
in,
it's big enough
hopefully.
yet, but
Yeah, we're telling you, it's coming up on winter break. We're going to get a little bit of snow. Winter outdoor activities for kids and families just to get outside and enjoy our outdoors across Minnesota. And we're joined by Pete Cleary from Dodge Nature Center today to talk a little bit about just fun stuff you can get outside and do over holiday break this year. So Pete, I think with that, I'll pass it over to you.
thanks, Benji. And today I'll give you information about outdoor winter activities for kids and families. And hopefully my goal for you is to have at least one idea of something that you could do outdoors, simple ideas. I'm not going to talk about ice fishing. I'm not going to talk cross-country skis, snowmobiling, snowshoeing. This is just simply getting into the out of doors and how to do it comfortably and safely with your family, so that you can start doing it as a routine. Um, the the picture that you see in front of you is me stopping traffic for a bunch of kids crossing the street in the wintertime. The temperature is hovering right about 0, and they are geared up and ready, but all of them have different gear on. And when I think back to the amount of gear that I had as a kid, I wasn't, we didn't have waterproof or expensive. We had the stuff that was good enough to go outside. And that's where we will begin. Um, or maybe we will. So the basics for being outside in the winter, there has to be your mindset. Going outside in the winter can be a great adventure, and that's the mindset that you take in. Uh, Positive about going outside will be infectious to kids, and and they will have a sense of adventure at first, but adult role modeling is an important thing. Um, and what I was saying earlier about gear, you have to have good enough gear. That doesn't mean expensive. That means waterproof footwear. That means warm socks. Um, and while I won't say you have to have expensive socks, cotton socks don't work well in the winter. And don't put 2 pairs of socks into boots that aren't going to fit them anyways. That doesn't keep you warmer. As a kid, my 8 brothers and I shared 4 pairs of warm socks, 3 pairs that were wool and 1 pair that was polyester. And so that was what we had for going into leather boots. And we would spend outside time almost every day, out in the snow, out in just the cold, climbing, walking, riding our bikes. It really didn't matter. But having good enough gear um, was imperative. Small knit mittens and gloves don't work. But if you look at some of the gloves that these kids are wearing, they're all a little bit larger, and that helps out a lot. Having boots where your feet can move around in them, excellent. But gearing up is not super complex, and the starting locally and simply is what's around you where you live. That could be playing in your yard, it could be going to a local park, it could be exploring any of the spots close by. And right now with my grandkids, it's exploring in their yard or building in their yard, because that's local and close by. They can come back to it again and again and again. And it's repeating that pattern until it becomes a routine. And sometimes that pattern can be extended into the other times of the year. And sometimes that's actually where some of the best things come from. Because winter does change everything. And so when they're balancing on this log in this picture, they've bounced on this log in the fall. They bounce on the log in the winter. It changes everything. Uh, Experiences that you might have had in other seasons are completely different in the winter. The amount of things that you can see uh, at Dodge Nature Center, at your local park, the amount of things that are now visible that were not when the leaves were on the trees. You can find nests everywhere. And signs of animals being around are a lot easier to find, especially with this snow that's coming. And that leads me to this. Take time for finding things. Being able to slow your roll and take a look around at everything that's there. Um, Things you would not have noticed otherwise. The holes under the snow, the tunnels that come from all the animals that live in the subnivean layer, are incredibly fun to explore. And as kids would find, like, I found a hole, and I was like, you should look to see if there's any scat droppings in the end of it. And almost always they would find vole or mouse scat in it. Um, they would ask me, what do you think made this? And I would never answer it directly. I was like, look for more clues. See what you can find. And sometimes the clues are not going to be all that great. The indistinct tracks in the snow could have been a number of things, but it isn't one definite thing that you have to know. And as adults, it's great to, like, I think some people put too much pressure on themselves that they must know everything. And while I think I know quite a few things, it seems as if I might have forgotten more things than I actually knew at any time. But I don't need to feel like I'm the expert on everything, because the joy of discovery is merely being there and doing it together rather than having to know the name of every single thing. So I cut myself a bunch of slack, and I encourage other people that grace in being able to find new things is fun. Even the discovery of something that's out of place. When exploring by a tennis court, you are going to find tennis balls in the wild areas. And that can be just as thrilling as being able to see something else that was truly something from nature. Um, the tracks that animals leave behind are awesome. But again, you don't have to know what everything is. It's much more interesting, the stories that are told. With as many tracks as were on this deer trail, uh, the kid that's right there is like, did you see the blood? And mid-screen, there's just a chunk of blood that we found in the snow. From what? We guessed it was a deer, but that was the story that we put together. Um, there wasn't anything that went after it. We looked for more clues all around. We were trying to be careful to not wreck everything as we were walking, but sometimes our footprints are there to leave a story as well. So, um, being able to adventure out into the snow, and this can happen in people's yards too. Like the rabbit tracks around my house are one of the things that I can count on throughout the winter, knowing all of the damage that they were doing other times of the year. But yeah, to be able to see where things are going in your neighborhood and what kind of things might be out there. Eagles will be around all the time, and red-tailed hawks are sitting in trees along every highway throughout the winter. Being able to view those kind of wildlife um, is something that it just takes a little bit of looking up, um, and noticing the things that are around you. And sometimes in the winter, it's nice to just slow your roll and take a closer look at all the things that have been around you pretty much throughout the entire year. A little bit more visible now with less leaves on the trees. And I will discuss building with snow because we are coming into a time where we will be blessed with, I'm hoping, some snow. Um, on a warmer day, anything above 28 degrees and sunny, the snow will start softening and can be rolled and built into various objects. These are kindergartners, and I challenge them to build a 1 meter high snow tower. Um, this and one boy decided not to wear his gloves that day, and I was okay with the logical consequence of him being outside for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and having his hands be cold. His compatriots were like, "Yep, he still helps out." I'm like, "Yep, he still helps out," and his hands did get cold. I do actually monitor, and that's simply as grabbing a kid's hand with my hand to know just exactly how cold they are. Um, Cold to the touch, fine. Cold and starting to turn red, more concerning. Have him warm up, put his hands in his pocket, stop helping to build for a little while. Um, Turning gray, more concerning. But again, at above freezing temperatures or near to above freezing temperatures, the risk of frostbite is really phenomenally low. Um, so yeah, a cold injury in this case probably not going to happen in the time that we were spending outside. And if you notice cold injury starting to happen or uncomfortableness because of cold, then it is time to call it a day and come back and do it at another time. I also told them that wet means cold and cold means wet. And both of those are entirely true. They have the snow clothes that will keep them dry for a period of time in conditions like this, for a period of time. But their level of activity and the amount of time that they were spending on the ground in the snow was going to get them wet. And then being able to dry those snow clothes for another go round is something that's important too. You're going to run into times where the snow is not packable snowball snow. And as a child, I grew up in North Dakota, and almost all of the winter, that was the time where there was not packable snow to build things. It makes you a little bit more resourceful, and you have to change the snow into stuff that you can use for building material. And it's actually super simple. You have to mix it. You have to crush the ice crystals of each particular little snowflake. And I say that, and that must be very complex, and it's really not. Um, and I discovered it at the end of the driveway. Every time the snow would come by, no matter how light and fluffy the snow was and easy to shovel, as the plow put it in the end of the driveway, it became a rock hard mass in less than less than a half an hour. And so I was like, well, if I can create a rock hard mass like that, I should be able to do this less than half an hour. It involves compacting the snow, and you can either do it with a snow blower. That works out really well. You can step on the snow. That I've done. You can chop it with a shovel. That I've done. Um, and all of those things will create a hardened mass of snow that you can use later. You have to let it sinter. You have to let the ice crystals refreeze to one another. But that gets you to the more advanced building with, oh, I should have put get creative at the back. There's nobody in that, but I followed uh, there was enough good packable snow that we had people making snow people here and using different parts of plants as the crowns. And then my daughter and I decided that we'd put a pair of old sweatpants, a couple of sticks, and some boots in there to look as if they were a child in the snow. You can get creative with a lot of it. Um, but what helps out when it's entirely too cold to be able to roll up any snowballs is creating a snow pile. And the snow pile in the center of this picture was our quarry. And our quarry was snow blowed by me. It took me about 10, 15 minutes to go around in a circle and blow snow into a pile so that it was mixed well enough to harden overnight and then to be able to saw it. It's like slicing bread, quite honestly. And I say buy a garage sale saw because you don't want a sharp you don't want a sharp saw that could actually cut wood. And just about any saw will cut snow. Um, and we have a very specific snow cutting saw that has an aluminum blade with teeth on it that couldn't possibly cut anything else in the world. And it was an expensive purchase some years ago and has never worn out, and that's fine. I don't suggest that you have to spend a lot of money on it because I have an old garage sale saw that couldn't cut wood anymore, which is fine. But moving it back and forth allows you to cut snow quite easily, and you can tell how well you've mixed the snow um, by the way that it holds together when you cut through. Um, you have to cut underneath to be able to get it, but you can sculpt just about anything that you'd want out of snow. The one thing that I found is most difficult, spheres really are like top level of advanced building with snow. You can see a couple of obelisks that people were building in the back, a wall that was built in the back. Um, you can use this method to build an igloo. And I've built a number of them. The amount of engineering that it actually takes to build an igloo to get the last piece on the top and be able to put that last piece into place to hold everything together is a credit to all the native peoples that have done this like for hundreds and thousands of years. It is not an easy task. And so most people end up building walls. I would suggest in here that scale is an important thing too. Um, you could build things of any size, and uh, when you have less snow, the scale shrinks entirely. I could build an entire ice or snow igloo for uh, Fisher Price Little People pretty quickly and easily, and it'd still be fun for hours um, for kids. And so being able to cut snow blocks, you could try this on any snowbank that you run into. The stuff that is plowed up by the snowplow that's clearing the streets, you'll notice where it goes from packed snow to unpacked snow. Um, if you're trying to build yourself a Quincy, a snow house, we do that in the years where there's just an abundant amount of snow. Piling up snow with shovels will be enough to pack that snow overnight and get it to stay together. And it's much easier to dig out um, a hand shoveled snowpack. If you do a if you do a snowblower snowpack, and that pile will have to be chipped out. It is much more difficult. It's much more solid, much more sturdy, and has less bend over time because snow continues to flow until it melts away. Uh, But yeah, being able to dig out a snow tunnel in and I say it because I grew up in North Dakota, in every snowbank that the wind had blown, it was begging to have a tunnel cut into it. Um, the the snow that is driven by the wind and packed that way will hold together and still is pretty light. The snow that is mixed by the snowplow clearing the streets is really uneven and has times, and has the ability to cave in because the loosely packed snow and the heavily packed snow don't adhere to one another really well. Um, and so I'm not a huge fan of digging where the plow has already dug out. I'm much more a fan of building my own snowpack, whether it's hand shoveled or whether I do it with a snowblower. I just know that when I'm creating something with the snowblower, that I'm going to have to bring more tools. It's going to take longer and it's going to be a lot more physical. Um, with a hand shoveled snowpack, you can dig it out by hand, just with gloves, and and it's soft and easily formable to the touch. But yeah, with with the snowpack, there are times where we'll start the tunnel with ice fishing auger, just because it's a lot easier to get started um, doing that. Benji, are there any questions in the chat so far? Hearing none.
Yeah. No, I don't see any right now.
Awesome.
I love the fact you're bringing all the snow up though.
Yeah, it's and like even a small bit of snow, if you reduce the scale, and you can get super creative. Like I say a saw, you can bring out anything that you want as far as tools go. Because even a spoon in a child's hand to be able to carve into
Yeah.
the snow, they I told a group of kids one time. I said, and this was fourth graders, so I challenged them. I said, please make a 2 meter tower out of blocks of snow. And I showed the first kids how to cut snow blocks, and then I handed the saw off because I had picked I had picked a saw that I knew was not sharp, and the kids could quarry their own blocks. And I had two groups that are at about a little over 1.5 meters, and I looked over and they're starting to build a side structure so that they can actually get high enough to get to 2 meters. And I was like, I'm proud, like great problem solving. I love it. And I turn around and another group is in a what they've made a boat. And I was like, what are you doing? And then like I thought we were doing two. And like, we just wanted to make a boat. And so there they sat in their snow boat, and I was like, well, you know what? I, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna poo-poo your art and your creativity. So, and it was they'd made benches for each other in the boat, and they had a boat, and I was like, it doesn't get to 2 meters, and I get it, and that's fine. But yeah, creativity is something where I'm very unlikely to limit somebody who's like, wow, I just want to do this with the snow. You should give it a
Yeah.
try. You should definitely give it a try.
I
You
did
see
have
the
one
tree.
question,
Oh, yep.
Ben, about, and this is, I mean, sure, an experience of mine too, was dry snow versus wet snow. And the coldest adventure I've ever had in the Boundary Waters is about 40 below
Hmm.
for a few days up there, and the snow was so dry. We tried to build a Quincy hut and we just could not get it to set, and we ended up snowshoeing on top of it and doing all this, try to get the snow to set up hard enough. But um, we did get a little bit of a Quincy hut, but not a real good one. So, what's the
So
difference between dry and wet snow?
yeah, and the difference between dry and wet snow, it's probably more about the temperature. Um, each snow flake is a crystalline structure that has a bunch of projections off it. And what you're ideally trying to do is break all that up and let it refreeze to itself. Because at each of the breaks, a small bit of liquid water will be there from the break, and then it can adhere to itself. The amount of time that it takes for it to refreeze to itself is based is like and comes together kind of in packing snow. People will often try to do just the surface, and the surface part will get you almost nothing packed. Um, so if you're building blocks, and I've built blocks with just a small garbage can. Don't do a big garbage can, just a small garbage can, because you don't want to lift that big heavy thing once it's all done. I don't pack with anything but a broom handle with nothing on the end. So it is just a pole, and all I do is slide the pole down in to push or to slide down on the snow that's in the garbage can. And you can keep adding in more snow as you'll notice that it packs. Um, but yeah, snowshoeing on top of a snow pile will pack the outer inch, possibly. If you take a blade and cut down through the snow pile and continue to go, and I like for doing some of these piles, I've done them by hand rather than use a snowblower, but I'll shovel up a huge pile and I'll chop down every 2 inches with my shovel blade to get down to the surface of the ground. And I'll continue to do that. And you'll watch the loft of the pile just drop, 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 add more snow on, chop, 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 but every inch or so, because the slicing motion down is actually better packing than if you flip the blade flat and flopped it down on top. That's really only going to get you the surface. But if you chop in like that, you're chopping down through the entirety of the snowpack and getting it to set together. You'd probably in the boundary waters have to chop down like that and wait overnight for it to set up. At temperatures as cold as that, it'd probably take a little bit longer to set up. But yeah, you want to touch all of the snow, and you can flip blocks packed like that. Packed the ones that I was packing into the garbage can, I could flip as they were filled, pull the form up and go away. And I would wait, and in warmer weather, you can wait just a little while, cut underneath them and use them as blocks. And so people have a tendency to pack only the surface. And if you're really going to be building with snow, you have to pack the entirety of the snow pile, whether that's with a snow blower or with a shovel. Walking on snow, and we've done this plenty of times where we just we'll walk, we'll find the places where people and animals have been walking, and you can cut that snow with a saw because it's been stomped on and deformed and come together. And that's beautiful for making a lot of smaller things. Um, the city that's being built here by these people could go even a smaller scale, and you could have an entire civilization living out in your yard. So yeah, in cold weather and with it not as much snow, you can still do a lot of building with snow. It's just a matter of how do you pack it. And again, packing is much more about touching all of the snow and moving all of the snow. And again, I learned that the from the snowplow clearing the street and dropping it off. That snow has been rolling in front of that blade and lands in your driveway. And if you don't get out there immediately, within a half hour, it is rock hard. Um, and that happens even at cold temperatures. So um, the mixing is the important part in being able to use snow. And this came from years of where there's not very much snow, and we really still like to have something built. Um, and there have been years where we get a mountainous amount of snow and it's great and wonderful. But there are other times where you're like, well, no, we could still pull this off with what we have. So if you have the opportunity to do a winter cookout, always good. Always good. And I told Benji earlier that I'm not a fan of s'mores. I will no longer break up graham crackers. I'm much more of the person that's, yes, I will roast marshmallows. This particular popcorn popper that you see out in front is to go along with roasted marshmallows so that the kids would not have to remove anything but one glove to be able to put the marshmallow onto a stick. Choppers, and I will plug leather mittens because they are wonderful and um, one of the greatest accessories for any successful winter cookout. You're wearing more or less oven mitts on your hands if you're wearing choppers, and being able to cook popcorn over fire, dump it into a bowl, and have these kids roast a marshmallow and squish said marshmallow in as once it was melty into that popcorn, creating campfire popcorn ball, to me is much better than trying to break up graham crackers and chocolate. And if you've got to take off your gloves to break up graham crackers and chocolate, you're going to get cold hands. To be able to open up a pack of Girl Scout cookies or fudge stripes, and everything's already done for you, and put the melted marshmallow in there, you're going to have a much better wintertime experience, according to me, because you're going to get to have your gloves on a lot longer. Being able to take off one glove and have one glove off for a period of time was an important lesson for these kids to be able to be at a campfire. And that was one where they helped out. Like, you're gathering the wood, you can help me build the pile, you can light the match if you choose to. And that was the opportunity to come in. But I have had a lot of kids come and say, "Oh, I know how to build a fire." And I said, "Which part did you get to do?" And they say, "I got to get the rocks for around the fire." And I said, "That's really not building a fire. You got given busy work to keep you out of the way because the people that you're with didn't believe that you could be safe around the fire." And I said I gave these kids safety briefing. I was like, "I expect you to be around the fire. You can be as close or as far as you want to be. When the smoke blows in your face, then you know you're in the wrong spot." And they're like, "Okay." And I was like, "We don't mess around at the fire, but we are going to cook and you're going to have to get close to it." "Okay." "And you're all wearing clothes that will melt. So make sure that you are not too close to the fire when you're roasting with your roasting stick." "Okay." "And when that marshmallow starts on fire, you blow that out." "Okay." And they all, to a person, were like, "Yep, this is great. I can do it." And they all liked incredibly burned marshmallows. And I was like, "Man, you need to practice cooking." So did have to scale back a little bit. I was like, I want to see somebody that can actually make a brown marshmallow. Brown, not black, brown marshmallow. Um, and yeah, and the smell went with them in their clothes. They are comfortable sitting in the snow because they're wearing snow pants. They've got the gloves that'll be able to keep them warm. They can take off a glove and put it back on. They have the coats that are doing it, and everybody helped out that day. So I was like, well, we can do this. And they did it. Popcorn's always a hit. Tiny little hot dogs, way better than full-size hot dogs. If you have a chance to get little smokies for a cookout, they don't generally fall apart into two pieces, and kids can roast them. Um, they can eat them raw; they're fully cooked, so it doesn't matter. But they can actually warm them up and eat them. They're really easy to take along with you, and nobody's like, "Oh, nobody's begging for a bun. Nobody's looking for ketchup or mustard." If you take little smokies, they are just, and they're delicious. So always good. You can get as creative as you want. I have friends that will make Rice Krispie bars over the campfire. I have friends that will do pineapple upside down cake. You don't have to invest in a lot of cast iron, but having this, even as a simple cookout outside your house, like if you've got a spot to be able to have a fire i- in your yard or at a local park, it can be an easy way to make some memories. I have to explain this picture because a lot of people misunderstand what it is. When the snow gets to mm, anywhere above 28 degrees, when the sun is shining, and you're going to look for a south facing snowbank of very fresh snow, you can push anything into it and create impressions. um, I discovered this when tackling a friend of mine's uh, daughter into the snow. And instead of doing the traditional face washing of picking up the snow and washing her face with it, I just pushed her face down into the snow. Yes, I understand it's a little bit mean, but it was funny at the time. And I looked at the mark that I made, and it was perfectly her face. And I was like, and then I immediately had to try it for my own self. And I pushed my face down into the snow, and it leaves a beautiful imprint. It's cold. It is very cold, but it is very artful. And I would start doing this, and I'd push my face in the snow, and the kids would see it. And then a couple of them would be like, "I can do that too." You have to find the right south facing snow, right? As it's got to be newer snow. It's got to be relatively fresh and on the way to becoming snowball snow. But you can make impressions. And as the kids are starting to press their faces into the snow because we are doing art, I noticed that there was actually two kids then changing mine and putting horns and a beard off on mine. And I was like, "You little rascals," and then had taken their hands and started creating a miniature body under my my facial impression. I was like, okay. So and I don't have anything against snow angels. It's a form of art. But it's one of the lower ones. Like, that's hardly even trying. It's great. It's good activity. It's large motor. I love that part. I do like the additions that kids will make on it. And like, mine's turned into an eagle. I was like, that's what I like. I'm turning mine into a trumpeter swan. It's like, I want to see the neck. Um, but yeah, when and fake tracks in the snow have been something that we end up doing a lot. And that's more hand printing in there and then trying to create claw marks or whatever. But being able to put a pattern together, some kids will try to be like, "You made one fake track." No one will believe one fake track. that doesn't, everybody knows that it's fake because there's only one of them. So what you need to do is start creating the trail of a number of different fake tracks so that people will get confused by it. And in that, you're, I was teaching him what I thought was art, and actually and how to create different impressions. But being able to print in the snow with whatever might be, being able to draw in the snow, being able to sculpt the snow into various different forms. Coloring the snow, I generally steer away from yellow and red. But being able to put, you got to drop that water down to just above freezing. So if you can get it, fridge temp is fine. So if you're creating a dye with just food coloring is a little permanent. Temper paint might be better. Real thin temper paint might be better because it actually would come out. Um, and they have food dyes that you could use that would actually come out of clothing. Um, but yeah, or freezing ice shapes. Water balloons are one of the best. And but having the water balloon gone after you've created the shape, awesome. Buckets are fun. Um, and being able to get the ice out before it freezes completely will leave you a cavity in, whether it's a water balloon or a bucket, will leave you a cavity in there that you can use. And that's how, people do luminaries. But adding in yet another different color, if you freeze clear on your water balloon first, leave the cavity open, and then if you're able to add more liquid in of a color, you can get two going at once. It's pretty fun. But again, limited only by your imagination. Um, there are cool places around you throughout Minnesota. It doesn't matter where you live. This happens to be at Lilydale Regional Park, and frozen waterfalls are amazing and wonderful, but I'm not suggesting that you have to drive very far to get to cool places where you are. They are they surround us here. We are blessed in Minnesota to have cool places at our disposal all the time and not very far away. Um, if you look, I'm letting these two kids, which happen to be my own kids, climb up to the ice waterfall. Dad, can we climb up on the ice waterfall? I was like, did you bring gear that would be worthwhile for that to happen? No. Okay, so then climb up to it, but you're not going to climb up upon it. Will that hold you? Mm. And I let them push the envelope of where they thought it would be an okay thing. Um, there's acceptable risk in this because every action has risks to it. Every outdoor adventure is going to have some risk to it. And if it didn't, it would be really boring. Um, but minimize the terrible risks and still maximize the stuff. Did they get hurt? Yep. Did they get hurt when they slid down? Just my son. Um, did he get hurt badly? No. Did it make him more resilient? Did he have to bounce back up? Absolutely. And so, yeah, and seeing this is not, you have to judge what is your level of acceptable risk and let it push a little bit, because to build resilient kids, they need to be able to test some of their boundaries. But yeah, that's, and in that, so yeah, I'm not like I wasn't bubble wrapping anybody. There's kids that were at a fire. They could choose to be further away. Um, I had kids say, I can't climb up there. And I said, you can always try, but you can always choose. But yeah, there's an acceptable level of risk that encourages growth. But cool places can be anywhere. And if we're blessed enough to have a lot of snow, this is in the Barnes and Noble parking lot in Eagan many years ago. But we had snow clothes in the car, and I said, "Do you want to go Christmas shopping?" No. I said, "Well, we can stop to if we take stuff with us, we can stop and have an adventure." Okay. Um, the piles were huge. They had nowhere else to put the snow, and it became a mountain. And I grew up with this mountain across the street almost many years, and it was just let's go in and climb, and then slide back down, and then climb, and then slide back down, or throw large boulders at one another, or see if we can roll a big boulder off the top of the hill. So my kids, and then and then somebody else saw us doing it and was like, that's a great idea. And then I got reports from other people like, yeah, I was at Barnes and Noble today, and there's some weird people in the parking lot climbing on the snow pile. And I know who that was. We were technically Christmas shopping. We did get the gifts, and And in this, the negotiation is if we get the Christmas shopping done, then we'll have time for an adventure. And when you set it up like that, and if it becomes your routine, you can actually get all sort of shopping done and still have the carrot at the end of the stick to be able to like, oh, yeah, let's do that. Cool places are around you, and don't overlook even the simplest. And now I will entertain more questions and then finish with the story. But were there more questions that came up in the chat?
I get a lot of reactions coming across from your talking, but I haven't seen a whole lot of questions come in. So I really like your example of acceptable risk. One of the things when you're talking about the fire that I always remember having kids out around the fire and stuff was, their toes get cold, so they put their boots up close to the fire. And insulating clothing, boots, mittens, any of that stuff, it's insulating you from the cold. It also insulates you from the heat. So when you're putting your boots or anything near the fire, the chances of melting or burning happening is a stark reality, and it's something they really need to learn. And I think, a couple pair of choppers that have got a little too toasty once in a while. But if your feet are cold or if your hands get cold, the best thing really to do is take your boots off and warm up by the fire, and warm your boots up separately by the fire, and then put them back together, and then you stay warmer longer too. So
I've gone so far as to have kids like, oh, my feet are really cold. All right, but your snow pants are good, right? And they're like, yeah, they're good. And I've had kids carefully roast their socks way over the fire, much higher than a marshmallow. But having their boots off with their feet closer to the fire so they can actually feel the heat from the fire, and then drying their socks with sticks over the fire was actually more, 1,000 times better than what could happen if you're just trying to stick your boots up by the fire. You can see the
definitely,
steam rising off the outside of your boot while you can't feel any of that heat penetrating. Just
yep,
doesn't work. Um,
just does not work.
we
I have
and for the people we've missed, first ice. This was first ice some years ago, but first ice, if you're on a dock on a pond, first ice is one of the most amazing things because you can break out and you can see. I mean, if it's been a cold night and it's crystal clear, you can kids will break off pieces, and then we end up, if it's been just a beautiful clear sheet of ice, um, we'll end up throwing the pieces on the ice and just watch as it shatters and goes across the pond on a not completely friction-free surface. But the amount of distance that you can get is just amazing. And then we've done oh, rocks and snowballs, and like, will the rock bust the ice? If we throw the rock a little bit higher, will it bust the ice? If we throw the rock a little bit higher yet, will it bust the ice? And this is all in the first ice where you're not going out. You know it's not 4 inches yet, so you're just like, well, we're not going out on it, but that doesn't mean we can't do interesting stuff with it. And yeah, and the first formation of the ice in the year is some of the more fun stuff.
I think that sticks with you a long time, because every time I go down to a landing or a lake when the early season, I'm like, hey, see if the lake's froze over yet. There's always rocks laying out in the ice. People still, at adult age, whatever, are still throwing rocks out there to see if it falls through. So, and Jessica put a question here: how much time do you spend prepping the snow for a snow building program?
Ooh. All right, so we're gonna, if snow does arrive, for a snow building program, you that really kind of depends on what tools you're using and how big you're really going for. If I'm making about it's about 10 foot long, 4 foot high, 4 foot wide, that would take about 20 minutes of snow blowing. Um, if I were doing that by hand with just a shovel, that'd take closer to an hour. And then let it set overnight. Make sure you're just doing it in advance, or do it days, weeks in advance. It really doesn't matter. The snow will change a little bit because of the sun coming onto it. So the south side will get a little bit melted no matter how cold it is. That's just, the sunlight does that. There'll be some pitting out on that. If you're trying to build, or if you're trying to create an ice sheet on a hillside, it's darn near impossible. But like, that one requires a couple of days where you're working Like for our winter festival, I'll slick a hillside so the kids can just slide down in their snow clothes and no sleds required. It's not a very big thing, but pack down the snow and mix, and I'll do probably 1 hour, 3 days in a row of that. Um, but yeah, prepping prepping the snow shouldn't take a whole lot of time, and if the wind can prep the snow for you, that's even better. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. Um, but yeah, snowblower makes everything much quicker. Doing it by hand
Yeah.
might take you about an hour. But
And many shovels make light work, right? So get the kids out
many
there,
shovels make light work. True
get the kids
enough.
out
Yep.
there and help them out.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, as a
uh,
child, like there was no problem. Like we would gladly shovel as much stuff up as there was available, and like, well, I could make another snow pile. I could make another snow pile. I never
as long
made
as they
very
didn't
big
ask
snow
you,
piles as a kid, though. I don't know that I must not have been very strong as a child. So
it was always a chore if they asked you to do the driveway. To build a fort, it was completely worth it. But
no, because
shovel the driveway, we don't want to do that.
the driveway was where all the raw material for most of the forts at
Oh,
as a child. We'd scrape the driveway all in one direction to be able to have the maximum amount of snow in the off to the side to be able to use for building tunnels and caves and hideouts and all of the other stuff. Um, but yeah, that was like we had like, oh, you have to go shovel. Okay. Yep.
Jeff had a question. Do you have any good tricks or suggestions for drying out wet boots?
Drying out wet boots. So it was an investment, and but I have the I have a boot dryer that just has a heating element in it. You plug it in, and it dries your boots out overnight. I got a fancier one. I get Christmas presents all the time. And like, hey, you need another boot dryer? No, I don't. But I got a fancier one with a motor. It's already in the garbage because that motor broke. It had a timer, it had a motor, it had all these fancy things. My one that has just a heating element has yellowed over time because it's warmed my boots, and both dries them and warms them just by letting hot air rise up through your boot and out. Great, wonderful. Um, if you take your liners out, if you have boots that have liners, to me, that's the best winter boots that possibly can be. The ones that are two different pieces. And with all winter clothing, I'm a fan of layers that can be removed, dried, laundered, and returned. And so I don't have fancy Gore-Tex coat or anything like that. I just have a wind shell that goes over other layers on my body. I have a wind shell for my legs. So it's kind of snow pants, but it's much more like rain pants. I have one pair of long underwear that I very rarely use, but it's polypropylene so that it keeps me warm. Um, nothing, I wear nothing that's tight in the winter, not boots, not pants, nothing, because the amount of stuff that you need circulation. Um, but I also had a time where I didn't have a boot dryer, and this is going to be like, and this is harder to do now. I just crush up newspaper and throw it in there overnight. It pulled almost all the moisture out. Where you can find newspaper now? Yeah,
It can be a challenge.
in earlier times, being able to use newspaper to dry out, that worked. Um, Same could be, you can put a towel in there and pull out some of the moisture too. It's not quite as effective as paper, but yeah. And
Even put
then,
them over the register at your house.
yep, put them on something warm.
As soon as your feet don't smell too bad, because your house may smell like that. But
That's the downfall of the boot dryer as well, because it is always going to make whatever room that it's in smell like boots. Yeah.
yeah, Cleary had a good question. What are your three favorite winter activities when snow is not an option?
When snow is not an option,
Yeah.
um, going to find where the hawks and the owls have killed the rabbits. Is probably one of the more interesting things. But like the tracks and the patterns in the snow, when you can find where, like if you can find, and it's super fun to find where the wing marks of the hawk or the owl have come down as they were making a kill, and you can tell because there's the blood there. Then you find the gut pile a little bit further off, but you can see the wing marks in the snow. Going out to find cool, exciting things in the snow. One of my favorites. Getting out before the turkeys have come out of their roost and finding them up in the trees, probably second place. Um, but you got to get up early. They're going to roost up in trees. And for the people that think turkeys can't fly. You're wrong. Um, but yeah, they fly up and roost in the night in high trees, and at Dodge, that's in cottonwood trees. And if you can sneak out before they come down, you can sit off to the side and watch, and the sun will start hitting them. They'll start warming up, and the first one will go down and call out to the rest. And it's very fun to watch their responses because the one, cook, 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 and the other one's like, mm-mm. But yeah, but eventually they all just flutter down and come to the ground. And so yeah, being able to be there, I would say those are probably top two. Um, and then yeah, no, and this time of year is just great eagle spotting too. So if it's a blue sky day, being out and you're walking, no. And I would say going into spots where you can't go when it's frozen. A lot of people are like, "Whoa, you can go out on the lakes and ponds," and I was like, "Yeah, but the marshes are way cooler." So if you can go into a cattail marsh this time of year, it's like a maze. You can follow deer trails into most cattail marshes, and then just wend around. And the areas that were largely inaccessible because you'd sink up to your knee in wetland muck during the other times of the year now have you know uh, like 5-6 feet of cattails are starting to bend in now. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can go out in some places and just walk for what seems like ever in a spot that you're not going to be able to get to other times of the year.
There's some of that late season pheasant hunting is always fun too, because you get those marshy areas that are, there's not a lot of snow, but the wind and cold, and they get in those in the brush and the weeds and the cattails, and they hide out in there. You can almost trip over a
Oh,
bird or rabbit.
mhm. And when you get cold in those places, then you just do like they do, and like it's time to lay down here. You still got the sunshine on you, the wind's blowing over you. Pack yourself down a little bed of cattails and lay down. And you're like, now this is actually all right. Like,
Not too bad.
I can see why this is a thing. And
Uh,
then the final slide I'll leave you with is my other thought on acceptable risk. Some years ago, I was taking kids out and I said, please don't touch any part of you that's wet, gloves, whatever, onto anything that's metal because it's 6 degrees above zero at this moment. And as we're drilling a hole in the ice and taking the temperature and looking with the camera at all the different things that are underneath the ice in the pond, one boy decided to stick his tongue onto the railing. And uh, he extricated himself from the railing pretty quickly without the help of the fire department or hot water. Um, and as he stood there, and he says, well, it was largely unintelligible, but it sounded kind of like this. It was like, my tongue is bleeding. And I was like, yeah, your tongue should be bleeding because you shouldn't ought have done that. And I was like, but now you got to kind of have to spit into the snow. I learned on that day that, yeah, he was tough. And had made a mistake of doing this, hopefully learning. Um, and then, yeah, just got it himself. And by the next day, uh, he was fine. I looked and I was like, hey, how's your tongue? I know you can't put a Band-Aid on it, but I don't, oh, he's like, oh, it's fine. Okay. But those are what taste buds look like when stuck to a thing. So you can use that as a warning. It did become popular at the school that I was working at the time because one of the teachers in second grade at that point for her classroom would say, don't let your tongue ruin your fun, which was an admonition not to talk while the teacher was talking. And then it got made into a poster, that phrase and this picture um, for outdoor learning. But yeah, acceptable risk. Did that hurt that kid that day? Yeah, it did. Should he not have done it? Probably. Will he do it again? I he might. But yeah, but even years and years later, the story still remains. So
it's probably a rite of passage in Minnesota. Either you or somebody you know closely has done that, and you've either learned the hard way or you've learned from watching somebody else suffer through it, right?
I think, and yeah, uh, I think that most people don't need to be told not to, and some people need to test it for themselves.
Hey, Christian, one more question here. Do you ever use a chainsaw for cutting your snow, or just fixed blade?
Just fixed blade, because it's like, 'cause you can even bend the fixed blade, um,
Oh, yeah.
and do curved shapes on that for digging out some of the hand piled snow houses. You can bend a fixed blade and carve into the snow house and use that as a way to create the curved ceiling in there, and it works out incredibly well. So I have never tried a chainsaw. Um, I had gone and bought myself a more expensive, very sharp saw at the hardware store after noticing how well my saw that's dull worked. I was like, I've got to get myself, and this will be great. I'll have much more precise cuts. Um, and in the first thing, I was like, these are really like 5% more precise of cuts. And then I cut right through my chopper, and I was like, if I would have used my old one, it'd have been 5% less precise, and I would still have an intact chopper. So, and then I would never give that saw to a child because it was like, man, you're gonna cut through all of your snow clothes and possibly do damage to you. This other thing, which can't hardly cut butter, by the action of you going back and forth, and it's similar to, I guess I liken it to when they remove a cast. They use a blade that can cut through the fiberglass by oscillating back and forth very quickly, but it doesn't, like, you can touch to your skin, nothing happens. And I was like, well, that's the action that I would go for with doing this. So it's the sawing action rather than the sharpness of the blade that gets you the better cut onto your snow blocks or any of the sculpting that you might be doing.
It's a great analogy. I love that. So
Yep.
I want to remind everybody too that I did put a bunch of links in the chat. One to Dodge Nature Center. Of course, Pete, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing
Absolutely.
the stories and the passion you have for being outside in the winter, especially. We also did with one of your colleagues, Pam, we did a camp cooking webinar. I put the link for that in there, and stories in the snow, just about tracking outside, and then a couple resources for clothing, getting kids outside. One from Teach Outdoors Minnesota and one from the DNR. So click on those in your chat function if you get a chance to do that. Brian had one more question in here. He said, I apologize if you already addressed this. How about teaching kids to stay hydrated while outside? This is a constant battle. Hot liquids are my friend in the winter, but
Yep.
what do you have to say to keep kids hydrated?
Um, I've like, you will be warmer when you're hydrated, and so the hydration thing, but it's a dangerous game. It is a dangerous game. I would say make sure that they're hydrated before going outside. Make sure that they also have the option to go to the bathroom before putting the snow pants on. Um, the 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 risk of dehydration is actually pretty low. Um, like, because you can, and especially if you're going outside for half an hour, an hour, the risk of dehydration is really pretty low. It just works to help you stay warmer. The risk of having to go to the bathroom in that time, if you are like really well hydrated, is a little bit higher. And so that one, like, access to the bathroom is more of a concern than dehydration to me, or access to the time it takes to successfully complete a bathroom visit, removing because if you're getting your snow pants off, you got to get them boots off too. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. Going outside and being active, and working up a thirst is a wonderful part about being outside, because then when you come back inside, um, you're drinking water and possibly hot chocolate. Hot chocolate is hard to rehydrate on because it's too darn hot. Um, but yeah, like quite honestly, I mean, it is a thing. And if you're working around a fire, you're going to work up a thirst for a lot of liquid, not, like, and it might not be hot chocolate. Hot chocolate at campfire is a tougher one to pull off successfully, because uh, cups and mittens are not great good friends on kids that are under 18. I don't know. I mean, like, early childhood, really hard. And then even throughout, like, practicing practicing with gloves on to do anything outside in the winter is astronaut training, because um n- and I've done it. I was like, okay, can you actually, because kids are like, well, I'm going to put on snowshoes, and like, we're going to prep this inside so you actually know how it goes, because it's going to change completely. And if you're doing it inside, I'm going to make you wear your gloves, because you're going to try wearing your gloves outside, and you're going to see just exactly how little fine motor skills you have
Yeah.
while wearing gloves or mittens.
How about eating snow to stay hydrated?
Eating snow is fine. It doesn't, like, uh, people, you do not get more hydrated from eating snow.
No.
But as a child, I ate snow all the time. Like it's people are like, oh, that's disgusting, and I was like, to a degree, sure, I guess. Like, you don't, but then don't eat yellow snow was a very popular phrase back then, and good advice even to this day. Um, we had some teachers that would try to convince the kids not to eat snow, and I would say, if you want to try it out, and I would say this is a great idea, get a clear container of some sort, fill it entirely with snow, bring it inside to melt, and but then put the mark on the top so you know that it was entirely filled with snow at the beginning, and then mark where the line of liquid water is so that you know how much of that snow is actually air. And it's almost all of it. Like, almost all
Yeah.
of it. And then they'd see the floaties in there of the different things that might be in the snow. And I would have the kids try to scoop up as clean of snow as they could possibly get. And the teachers would then show the kids um, the floaties and what they thought was, well, this will teach them to never eat snow again. And most of the kids are like, it's fine.
Good.
Like, all right, I'm going to push the science part of it. You do the other thing. Mine's going to be more effective. So,
So I think we're just about out of time. So if anybody has any last questions, if you want to pull your PowerPoint down, Pete, you could do that. Um, just want to, thank everybody for joining us. This brought up a lot of fond memories from, being a kid and being outside in the winter and doing some crazy things and sledding down hills and that probably weren't supposed to and jumping off of snowbanks and whatnot. But there's a lot of fun to be had out there in the winter. So I hope everybody gets a chance to get outside and enjoy it, snow or no snow, this holiday season here coming up. And I want to remind everybody also, we're taking a little bit of a break. The holidays happen to fall right on Christmas, or Wednesdays happen to fall right on Christmas and New Year's this year. So our next show will actually be in the new year, January 8th. And we're talking about red-headed woodpeckers in Minnesota. So hopefully everybody has a safe and happy holiday season here. And we will see you in a few weeks.
hey, Benji, you got
Talking about
time for a
woodpeckers.
shameless plug for Dodge's Winter Fun Fest?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about to see if you guys had any good plans for winter here coming up.
Okay, so last year got canceled and it broke my heart. But this year in February, look on our website for Dodge's Winter Fun Fest. We will be building each year, build ice golf course with a bunch of snow sculpted in the ways that you've seen. There'll be kick sledding. There'll be if I can ice down a hill, there'll be an otter slide, and all sorts of other things. A lot of the stuff that I was talking about will be used in one way or another to create a bunch of different fun for families outside.
I need to put a link to Dodge Nature Center in the chat there too. So check it out, Dodge Nature Center. They have a lot of fun activities. Winterfest sounds like a blast. A lot of other fun things to do there for kids and families too. So enjoy. Again, Pete, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and passion and fun stories with us. We really appreciate it. And everybody stay safe out there. And we'll see you in a few weeks.
Thanks, everybody.